19 years old, sitting in one of the most powerful offices in the music industry, and Whitney Houston had no idea she was about to sign away her soul. It was 1983, and the contract on Clive Davis's desk wasn't just a record deal. It was a blueprint for creating the biggest pop star the world had ever seen. But what they never told you is what Whitney had to give up to become Whitney Houston. The woman who walked into Arista Records that day and the icon who walked out 7 albums later were two completely different people. And the transformation wasn't an accident. It was engineered, calculated, and it destroyed her. This is about how Clive Davis didn't just discover Whitney Houston. He invented her, and 30 years later, that invention killed her. If you want to hear the story they don't want you to know, hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about Whitney Houston's rise to fame. Before Clive, the girl nobody wanted. Before Clive Davis, Whitney Houston was an incredibly talented singer that nobody knew what to do with. Multiple record labels had already passed on her. Not because she couldn't sing. Everyone knew she could sing. They passed because they didn't know how to sell a black girl from Newark who sang gospel music. Whitney's mother, Sissy Houston, was a gospel legend who sang backup for Aretha Franklin and Elvis. Her cousin was Dionne Warwick. Music was Whitney's entire world. By 14, she was performing with her mother at New York nightclubs, developing that voice that would become legendary. But Whitney wanted to sing gospel. That's what she loved, where she felt authentic. She constantly told her mother she wanted to make gospel albums, sing in churches, use her gift for God. But Sissy knew something Whitney didn't. Gospel singers don't become millionaires or global icons. When it came time to offer contracts, labels balked. CBS Records passed, saying she was too ethnic for mainstream success. Warner Brothers said her voice was too powerful and would intimidate audiences. Even Motown passed. Every rejection praised her talent, but questioned her commercial viability. Translation: she was too black, and they were too afraid to take the risk. Nobody except Clive Davis. The Discovery, Sweetwater's nightclub. Spring 1983, Whitney was performing at Sweetwater's, a small New York nightclub. Jerry Griffith, Clive Davis's A&R executive, was in the audience. When Whitney sang "The Greatest Love of All," Jerry sat frozen. Years later, he said, "I realized there is such a thing as a perfect voice, and I was listening to it. Not one flaw. It wasn't human. It was supernatural." Jerry called Clive from a payphone before Whitney finished her set. "Clive, I found her, the one we've been looking for. You need to see her immediately." 2 weeks later, Clive Davis walked into another venue where Whitney performed. Within 30 seconds, his skepticism vanished. He knew he was looking at the future of music, but he also knew something darker. Whitney Houston, as she currently existed, would never become a superstar. She would have to be remade, repackaged, sanitized. Her blackness would have to be softened. Her gospel roots suppressed. She would have to become something she wasn't, or the world would never accept her. The meeting, the contract. When Whitney walked into Clive Davis's office, she was nervous but excited. She brought her mother because she was 19 and didn't understand the business. She thought this meeting was about her talent, She had no idea it was about something much bigger. Clive's office was legendary. Platinum records lined the walls, photos with music royalty everywhere. When Whitney and Sissy sat down, Clive got straight to the point. "Whitney, you have the most extraordinary voice I've ever heard. I want to make you the biggest star in the world." Whitney's face lit up, but then Clive continued, "But I need you to understand something. Talent is not enough. What matters is image, marketability, and timing. You have the talent. Now, we need to create the right image." Sissy leaned forward. "What exactly do you mean by the right image?" "Whitney has incredible crossover potential, but to achieve universal appeal, we need to be strategic. We need to make her accessible, relatable, non-threatening. Non-threatening. That word hung in the air. It meant whitewashing, downplaying Whitney's blackness, her gospel roots, everything that made her who she was. Clive pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the desk. "This is a 7-album deal. The advance is substantial, but signing this means giving me complete creative control. I choose the producers, I choose the songs, I choose the image, I choose everything. Your job is to sing. My job is to make you a star." Sissy looked shocked. "Whitney doesn't get any say in her music?" Clive smiled coldly. "If Whitney wants to be a gospel singer, selling 20,000 albums, she doesn't need me. But if she wants to be a global superstar selling millions, she needs to trust me completely. Trust Clive and become everything she dreamed of, or walk away and remain obscure." It wasn't really a choice. Whitney Houston signed the contract on June 22, 1983. She was 19, no lawyer present, no manager. She just signed, trusting this man would make her dreams come true. And he did. But the cost was devastating, the erasure. The transformation began immediately. 3 days after signing, Clive called Whitney into his office alone. He said something that would haunt her forever. "Whitney, the girl who walked in here last week, that girl can't be a superstar. She's too Newark. She's too black. She's too gospel. America isn't ready for that girl. So we're going to create a new Whitney Houston, one that everyone can love." Whitney sat stunned. She thought signing meant she'd finally share her voice with the world. She didn't realize it meant hiding everything else about herself. The makeover was systematic and brutal. A stylist named Patricia was brought in. Patricia looked at Whitney's natural hair, full lips, curves, and started making notes. "We need to straighten the hair, European style. Teach her makeup that minimizes her ethnic features. Elegant clothing, nothing too urban or too black." Whitney was sitting right there. She heard every word. When she looked at Clive for support, he just nodded. "Patricia's right. We're selling to middle America. We need you to look like someone their daughters can aspire to be." Then came voice coaching, not to improve her technique, which was flawless, but to teach her to sing less black. The coach told her to pull back on gospel runs, reduce the soul in her delivery, make her voice cleaner and more controlled. Whitney was literally being taught to sing worse. But the most devastating change was her accent. Whitney spoke with a Newark accent, distinctly Black American. Clive hired a dialect coach to train her to speak properly, which meant white. Hours of practice, learning to drop her natural speech patterns. A friend later told a journalist, "I called Whitney a few months into her deal, and I didn't recognize her voice." Not singing, speaking. She sounded completely different. When I asked about it, she started crying. She said, They're taking me away from myself, and I don't know how to stop it." The music she couldn't make. In early 1984, preparing to record her debut album, Whitney came to Clive wanting to include gospel songs, songs that connected to her roots, honored her mother's legacy, felt authentic. Clive's response was immediate: no. Gospel doesn't sell to pop audiences. Gospel is niche. You want to be Aretha Franklin singing to black churches? Or the biggest star in the world? Whitney tried to argue gospel was her foundation, where her voice came from, what meant something spiritually. Clive didn't care. "I didn't sign you to make music that matters to you. I signed you to make music that matters to millions. And millions don't want gospel." This conversation happened repeatedly over the years. Every time Whitney wanted gospel on her albums, Clive shut it down. Because the contract gave him complete creative control, there was nothing she could do. Her debut album contained 0 gospel songs. Instead, "You Give Good Love," "Saving All My Love for You," "How Will I Know?" Safe, palatable songs designed to make white America comfortable with a black woman on their radio. It worked. The album was massively successful, but for Whitney, it was painful proof that her voice belonged to Clive Davis, not to her. She was singing what she didn't choose, what didn't represent who she was. The hidden love. While becoming the biggest pop star on the planet, Whitney was falling apart inside. She couldn't go to Newark clubs, couldn't hang with old friends, couldn't date who she wanted. Everything was controlled, managed, filtered through public perception. There were rumors about Whitney's sexuality, whispers about her relationship with her assistant, Robin Crawford. The rumors were true. Multiple people have confirmed Whitney and Robin were romantically involved for years. But in the 1980s, that relationship had to be hidden, suppressed, denied. A black female pop star appealing to white suburban America could not be openly gay. It would have destroyed her career instantly, so Whitney hid. She hid who she loved. She hid who she was. She smiled for cameras, gave perfect interviews, sang perfect songs, and slowly lost herself. The people making millions off her talent didn't care. As long as she kept selling records, her personal happiness was irrelevant. Robin Crawford wrote in her memoir, "Whitney would come home from tours, close her bedroom door, and cry for hours. She felt like she was living a lie. She couldn't complain publicly because Clive would shut it down. She was completely alone, trapped in a golden cage everyone thought was paradise." By 1987, Whitney's second album was even more successful, debuting at number 1. But she was already using drugs to cope with the pressure, loneliness, and constant sense of living someone else's life. The Backlash, Soul Train, 1989. By 1989, Whitney had achieved what no black female artist ever had: genuine crossover superstardom. But while white America embraced her, many in the black community felt betrayed. The tension exploded at the 1989 Soul Train Music Awards. When Whitney's name was announced, a significant portion of the audience booed. At an award show celebrating black music, a black woman with one of history's greatest voices was booed by her own community. Whitney was devastated. She later wrote, "I felt like my own people turned their backs on me. They thought I was a sellout. They didn't understand I didn't have a choice. I was doing what I was told." But here's the tragedy. Whitney wasn't doing it out of cowardice. She was locked into a contract giving Clive complete creative control. She literally couldn't record the music she wanted without his approval. After Soul Train, Whitney confronted Clive. She was angry, hurt, desperate for change. She wanted to record gospel music, songs that meant something, connected to her roots, felt authentic. Clive said no. Gospel was niche, would alienate the pop audience, would be commercial suicide. She was under contract for 4 more albums, and he would choose their direction. She could take it or leave it. If she left, she'd owe millions in breach penalties. Whitney locked herself in a bathroom stall and cried for 20 minutes. A secretary heard her sobbing, "I just want to sing what I want to sing. Why won't they let me?" Bobby Brown, Rebellion. In 1992, Whitney married Bobby Brown, baffling everyone. Bobby was the opposite of Clive's crafted image, raw, unpolished, unapologetically black. But that's exactly why Whitney married him. She was tired of being perfect, tired of control. Bobby represented freedom, rebellion, authenticity. Clive hated the marriage. He saw Bobby as a threat to everything he'd built. But Bobby encouraged Whitney to be herself. Stop caring what white America thought. Embrace her blackness and gospel heritage. Bobby later said, "Everyone talks about how I destroyed Whitney, but nobody talks about how I was the only one who let her breathe. She could be herself with me. She didn't have to be the perfect pop star. She could just be Nippy from Newark." That was true. With Bobby, Whitney could let down her guard, express her anger and pain without being managed. But Bobby also introduced her to heavier drugs. Occasional use became daily. A coping mechanism became addiction. And as her personal life spiraled, her professional life suffered. Yet, even as Whitney descended into addiction, Clive continued pushing her to record more, tour more, make more money. Because Whitney wasn't a person to him. She was a brand, a product, a revenue stream, the conspiracy. Was this always the plan? Here's where we enter uncomfortable territory. What if Whitney's destruction wasn't an accident? What if it was engineered from the beginning? Think about it. Clive signs a 19-year-old with an extraordinary voice. He immediately strips away her identity, culture, authenticity, refuses to let her record music she loves, forces her into an uncomfortable public image, isolates her from her community. And when pressure becomes too much, when she starts using drugs to cope, instead of getting help, he pushes harder. Why would someone do that to a person they claim to love? Unless the destruction was the point. Unless creating a superstar who would inevitably self-destruct was more profitable than creating a healthy artist with a sustainable career. There's a dark theory in the music industry. Some executives deliberately create unstable superstars because instability is profitable. Scandal sells. Tragedy does. A tragic figure who rises and tussles, that becomes legend. That becomes immortal. Look at Clive's history. Whitney wasn't the only artist under his control who struggled. Janis Joplin died of an overdose at 27. Phyllis Hyman, another talented black female singer Clive worked with, committed suicide after years of depression and feeling controlled. The pattern is there. I'm not saying Clive deliberately set out to destroy Whitney, but he created the conditions for her destruction. He built a golden cage and locked her inside. And when she threw herself against the bars, desperate to escape, he didn't open the door. He just made the cage more beautiful. The sealed contract. After Whitney's death, her estate fought to see the full, unredacted 1983 contract. The record label fought to keep it sealed. They went to court, spent hundreds of thousands in legal fees, all to prevent Whitney's family from seeing the contract she signed at 19. Why? Sources close to the proceedings suggest the contract contained extraordinarily exploitative clauses about image control, who she could be seen with publicly, what statements she could make, penalties for weight gain or appearance changes, clauses that turned Whitney Houston into a wholly owned subsidiary of Arista Records. One lawyer who reviewed portions said Whitney's contract was one of the most controlling documents I've ever encountered. It wasn't just about music, it was about ownership of a human being. If it became public, it would expose the industry in ways that could lead to serious legal reforms. The case settled out of court. The contract remained sealed. They don't want the world to see how they treated Whitney, the level of control they exerted. Because if that contract became public, it would destroy reputations and end careers. And after Whitney died, Clive continued profiting from her music. Posthumous albums, documentaries, licensed songs, millions of dollars off her death, all while maintaining his image as the grieving mentor who lost his protege too soon. The diary nobody knew about. In 2019, Robin Crawford revealed something shocking. Whitney had been keeping a diary, a private record of her thoughts during the years under Clive's control. Robin shared only a few excerpts out of respect for Whitney's privacy. From 1986, after her first album went multi-platinum, "Everyone thinks I'm living the dream, but I feel like I'm dying inside. I can't sing what I want. I can't love who I want. I can't be myself in my own home because someone's always watching, managing, controlling. When does it end? When do I get to just be Whitney?" From 1991, after Soul Train, "My own people hate me. They think I sold out. And maybe they're right. I sold my soul for success. But the worst part is I didn't even get to choose. Someone else made that deal when I was too young to understand." From 1999, during heavy drug use, "I look in the mirror and don't recognize who's staring back. That's not Whitney Houston from Newark. That's a manufactured image, a product, a brand. I'm so tired of pretending. Sometimes I think it would be easier to just disappear. Maybe then I could finally be free." Robin never said it explicitly, but the implication was clear. Whitney had been thinking about escape for years. The fact that she felt so trapped, so unable to be herself that she was writing about disappearing, tells you what Clive's control did to her psychologically. The final album. Whitney delivered her seventh and final album to Arista in 2009, "I Look to You." It was a pale shadow of what she'd been capable of. Her voice was damaged by years of crack cocaine, but It fulfilled her contract. After 26 years, she was finally free. Except she wasn't. By then, Whitney didn't know who she was without Clive telling her. She'd spent her entire adult life being manufactured, controlled, directed. The gospel singer from Newark, who sang for God and her community, had been erased decades ago. What was left was a broken woman who couldn't escape the gilded cage. 3 years later, Whitney Houston was found dead in a Beverly Hilton bathtub, and Clive went on television talking about how much he loved her, how she was like a daughter. But he never acknowledged his role in her destruction, never admitted the pressure, control, identity suppression contributed to her downfall. He just cried on camera, collected sympathy, and kept profiting from her catalog. The questions that remain: what if Whitney had been allowed to make that gospel album in 1989? What if she'd been given creative freedom? What if she'd been encouraged to be her authentic self? What if someone had prioritized her well-being over profit? We'll never know. Clive chose profit over artistry, image over authenticity, control over freedom, and Whitney paid the price with her happiness, identity, and ultimately her life. There's a recording from 1981 of Whitney singing "His Eye is on the Sparrow" in a small Newark church before Clive. Her voice is pure, unrestrained, full of joy and authentic emotion. She's not performing. She's not trying to be palatable. She's just singing from her heart. That recording is who Whitney could have been, who she was before Clive turned her into something else. If you listen to that, then listen to the polished pop songs she was forced to sing. You can hear what was lost. You can hear the erasure. You can hear the tragedy, the truth they'll never admit. The contract Whitney signed at 19 made her the biggest star in the world, made her wealthy, gave her a platform most artists never achieve. But it also took something she could never get back: herself, her voice, her identity, her freedom, her joy. And in the end, that loss was too much to bear. The music industry calls it artist development, but sometimes it's more accurately described as artist destruction. When you take a human being and turn them into a product, when you suppress their authenticity and replace it with manufactured perfection, when you value them only for what they produce, you don't develop them. You destroy them. Whitney Houston wasn't just discovered by Clive Davis. She was created by him, controlled by him, and destroyed by him. Not intentionally, perhaps, but destroyed nonetheless. The girl who just wanted to sing gospel. In the end, Whitney's story is simple and heartbreaking. A young girl from Newark with the most beautiful voice in the world wanted to sing gospel music in churches. She wanted to use her gift to praise God, connect with her community, honor her mother's tradition. That's all she wanted. But the world, or specifically one powerful man, decided that wasn't enough. Decided her authentic voice wasn't marketable. So they took that girl and broke her down and rebuilt her into something palatable, something safe, something white America could embrace. And it worked. Whitney became the biggest pop star in the world. But the girl from Newark who wanted to sing gospel? She died in Clive's office in 1983, the moment she signed that contract. Everything after was just the world slowly realizing what Whitney already knew. The price of that success was her soul. Rest in peace, Whitney Elizabeth Houston. You gave the world your voice. You deserve to have a voice in your own life, and they took that from you. You deserve to sing gospel. You deserve to love freely. You deserve to be yourself. Somewhere in a better world, there's a Whitney who never signed that contract, who made gospel albums selling 20,000 instead of 20 million, who sang in churches instead of arenas, who lived a quiet, authentic life instead of a loud, manufactured one, who died old and happy instead of young and broken. That Whitney deserved to exist, and Clive Davis made sure she never did. The contract that changed everything didn't make Whitney Houston a star. It erased Whitney Houston and replaced her with a product. And that's the truth they'll never tell you.